Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Money Moves. For this episode, I want to quickly go over the S&Ps in the short term just because we are nearing some resistance and you don't want to stay too long before we start to see some correction. And it's been a while since we've seen a little bit of a downturn, so I'll talk about that. Then I'll briefly talk about what happened with oil between the UAE and Saudi Arabia and what that means for oil prices going forward. Then I'll give updates on each of my investing accounts, starting with Worthy Bonds, GroundFloor, Fundrise, my long-term retirement account, my M1 accounts, and then I'll finish up my investments with my option portfolios in Robinhood and Tastyworks. Then I'll finish up my assets with my monthly tracker. And of course, there'll be some jelly at the end, which is something I enjoyed outside of the markets. If you have big dreams like owning the 2021 S-Class, or if you're just getting started on your financial journey, definitely like and subscribe. It may look fairly normal on the outside, but on the inside it has tons of luxury and technology, and it costs anywhere from $110,000 up to $200,000. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. Alright, so let's get started here with SPX. And the very near-term goal, you can see we've been bouncing in and out of this channel, riding this center trend line, and then we got the breakout, which projected us much higher here on the close of the week. If you want to start taking some profits here, it's certainly not a bad time to do so. You can see last time we got into this range here, we did see a correction back down to the midline, which you could expect to be around 20 to 25 points lower than where it is right now. But if you want to ride it up to this upper trend line, maybe we'll see some price action like we did here above that midline. That would give you a price target somewhere around $4,400 or $440 on SPY. If we do get that extended ride of this upper trend line or a break, that would give you much higher prices, but that seems less likely just because of this very strong run we've had off of the lows already. I think 4,400 would be an awesome take profit. If we get into that range, I expect we'll see a retest at least of this lower trend line, which if we hit that point, you could see we would come back down into this lower range, which is about right where we're at right now. And then if we extend this lower trend line out here, you can see we would be back down to around 4,275 or so in terms of the next support level in the short term. Of course, there's always a probability here that this could break out, which would give us much higher prices here in the short term, maybe 45 to 4,600. This would certainly be a blow off top, especially at the velocity that we're going here in terms of short-term price action. And that seems less likely in my opinion. So for me, 4,400 seems like the upside, where I will reduce my position size quite a bit down to around a quarter of my portfolio, maybe a third at the highest, just so I have some ammunition in the chamber to where I can re-enter positions if we go back down to these lower levels. Moving over here to the OPEC disputes between the UAE and Saudi Arabia. I know I've been talking a lot about oil here, but it continues to go up and rally every day. And it's a good place to make money, and I've been making some money in here, so it's definitely something that you should be paying attention to if you're trying to trade. Oil market's been hot, all the oil stocks have been going up, and if you trade oil directly, you've definitely been making some money on the long side. You can see here the group called off the meeting scheduled for Monday after Saudi Arabia could not convince the UAE, one of its most dependable supporters in the group, to sign off on boosting its outputs to tame prices. They continue to say the UAE has blocked the deal, asking for scope to produce more of its own oil under any accord. And as you would suspect, this drove prices higher. If they can't agree to produce more oil, of course, the demand is going to drive prices higher. And that's what they were basically trying to do, was agree to exactly how much more they were going to produce to not drive the price down too far, but also to meet demands and keep prices somewhat regular. If they can't come to any agreement, you can expect higher prices, and that's how we're going to continue to make money in oil. I continue to be long because we do see the reopening continuing to drive higher demand in oil. And if you've noticed the prices at the pump, this is at least one of the factors making gas more expensive at the pump. You can see earlier in the year, they dropped their output by 9.7 million barrels per day because the global demand was going significantly lower, obviously because of the pandemic, and they've gradually increased that over time, coming back to around 5.8 million barrels per day, which was expected to be an increase of 400,000 per day each month through late 2022. Basically, the UAE was unhappy with this as they want to continue to increase their output by hundreds of thousands of barrels per day, up to around 3.8 million barrels from 3.2 million barrels. Of course, they have to pay attention to Saudi Arabia, who is the largest member of this group and drives the most oil production. And in effect, they could crush the UAE by driving prices significantly lower if they wanted to. Of course, they hurt themselves in the process, and that's part of the balance that they have to take. The UAE has been significantly more friendly to the West here recently, signing a peace deal with Israel. Not hugely relevant here, but it does speak to their more modern and Western take on politics versus some of their compatriots. Moving on to my investments here, you can see I've withdrawn some money here from Worthy Bonds, dropping this down to $6,000 in terms of total dollars invested. The $5 you can see here is growth on my investment. I only own 600 bonds, and I think that's where I'm going to keep it here for the foreseeable future. And I've withdrawn all of my money out of Worthy Capital 2 and Worthy Community, which was not very much money, but this is where I want it to be. This is somewhere around 2 times my expenses on a monthly basis, and that gives me plenty of reserve cash on top of my savings account with Yada Bank. As always, if you don't have a Worthy account and you want to invest money at a 5% rate compounded daily, definitely check out the link in the description to get 1 free bond when you fund your account. Moving over to GroundFloor, I continue to increase this holding over time up to just over $4,600. And you can see the amount of money I've earned is $17 so far over the past few months. Remember, these are balloon payments, so you only make money once they're paid back completely. Moving over to LRO investments, you can see I have a couple of defaults pending here, and you can go in here and see some of the notes. For example, this was updated here just about a month ago, and that if the note is not paid back within 30 days, the foreclosure proceedings would commence, which again is not a huge deal for me as the investor. Usually GroundFloor can take care of these things and get the money back for the investor. But it is interesting to see that hopefully they'll be able to make my money back over these couple of notes, and it's a little bit concerning that there's 4 notes that are currently pending defaults. So far, I've had 1 default that was paid back in full, especially because this note for some reason was $120. I'm not sure quite why it was so much. But otherwise, everything seems to be doing well. I continue to return 9.8% with an expected earnings of around $300 if all of my notes pay back on time. And you can see the vast majority of my money here is in C notes, right around that 10% return allocation. Moving over here to Fundrise, this value continues to grow pretty quickly. You can see my appreciation was assessed here at just over $1,000 here year to date, putting my annual earnings up to just over $3,250, which is pretty good. You can see this slope is continuing to increase. It's not linear, it is increasing slowly here. And if we look at my goals, you can see my target is just over $500,000, which is right where I want it to be at $500,000 by 2040. And currently I'm projected to hit $519,000 by July of 2040, which is good to go for me in terms of my goals here. They continue to say they want me to invest larger and larger amounts of money to reach these goals, but I'm not quite sure why that is when they're saying that my target should be reached by July of 2040, which is perfect. Let's just make that look a little better here with a goal of $500,000 here by Q2 of 2041, so just stretch that out a year, and now I'm on track, even by their standards, to make $522,000 by July of 2041, which is perfect for me, which is a slightly less monthly investment than I do already. Otherwise, looking at my portfolio here, they continue to add projects here on July 1st, June 28th, June 22nd. So they're continuing to stay busy and add stuff to my portfolio over time. And I am happy with my returns so far. Moving on to my TSP account, you can see my current contribution allocation hasn't changed. And currently, my funds are distributed basically 50-50 between the S and C funds in terms of stock. And then I have a little bit over 13% in bond funds. You can see the account values up here, just under $85,000 for this account. Otherwise, no changes, just continuing to contribute to this, mainly because of my employer matching, and I want to maximize that. Moving over here to M1 Retire, continues to grow every single month, around $50 in dividends and $100 in market gains. Most of the slices were up here except for finance. Industrials was down a little bit. Telecom basically flat, and utilities was down a little bit. Otherwise, consumer, healthcare, dividends, tech, and real estate was up pretty heavily over the past month. Let's go over to activity here. You can see I continue to get dividends. I have been adding some money here, just a little bit, $20. This was a payback to borrow, so it shows here as a deposit, but really this is cash deposits here of $20. all of these different dividends paid out over the past month. And you can see I put in a little more money here, $50, and a couple of different buys. I did put in a little bit bigger transaction here in the middle of June, a couple of $100. And most of this was out of the sell of Merck & Co., which I did remove from my portfolio. And I did add Massimo here, which is a very good growth company in my opinion. Otherwise, in terms of buys, I've been doing a lot of dividend ETFs and some energy companies, as I think those have most of the upside in the foreseeable future. Moving over here to my higher yield savings account. This is supposed to be a flatter portfolio and would be my third tier of savings in case I really needed cash for something in the short term. You can see it was actually down here over the past month. $74 in dividend gains basically offset the market losses, but not completely. Looking at the slices here, you can see the value ETF was down slightly, so was the dividend ETF. DIV was down slightly. Realty income was really the biggest loser here, which is not really surprising when they announced that they're going to be selling shares on the open market to fund some debt as well as further investments in their company. So you should expect that the shares will go down at least a little bit here. Drogo did well. Bonds actually were up slightly. Simon Property Group was down. And then long-term corporate debt and bonds were up slightly as the yields have kind of tapered off in their relentless rally over the past couple of weeks. Moving over here to Robinhood, over the past month, up just over 7%, continuing to perform extremely well. This portfolio is heavily weighted towards oil. You can see SLB is an oil company, and then USO is oil futures directly. I go through all of these in much more depth here in my options portfolio overview, so check out that video linked in the description. Otherwise, you can see all of my positions in this smaller account here. Moving over to Tastyworks, you can see I did move some money from my Lending Club IRA into my Tastyworks IRA. So now I can use this money, and it was just over $2,000. So this went back up to over $14,000. Still doing really well year to date, up almost $600 on the year. And you can see my positions are in gold, real estate, and oil. I had a position in the S&P 500, but I took that off because I think we are getting close to that resistance point like I mentioned earlier. Otherwise, my individual account is doing quite well, up to almost $39,000 here. You can see it's actually down on the year because I took some pretty heavy losses at the end of first quarter, but I've made up quite a bit of those here into second and third quarter. Finally, finishing up with my newly named monthly tracker because I'm only going to do these every single month now instead of every 2 weeks. Seems like a better use of my time just because these videos don't change that much and it gives me a little bit more to talk about in each individual video. So I have my June 1st video was the last one, and then July 2nd here was the last time I ran my numbers, which haven't changed obviously over the holiday weekend. Anyway, looking at numbers, stock continues to trend up as the market is still at all-time highs. Trading continues to move upwards in an accelerated pattern as oil continues to do very well and the S&P 500 continues to do well. And even growth saw some upside over the past couple of weeks. Real estate continues to improve, especially with Fundrise assessing their appreciation, which was basically another monthly deposit on top of my already $650 deposit with them every single month. So that doubled my increase here for Fundrise. And I made some money on Realty Income and Simon Property Group in my trading accounts, which helped offset some of the losses in my long-term buy and hold strategy accounts. Bonds continue to trend down as I pull some money out of Worthy and move it over. This bond number also doesn't account for the bonds that I hold in Tastyworks, just to help offset the amount of cash that sits in that portfolio. So this number is actually a little bit higher, but it's kind of hard to assess it right now. Otherwise, Lending Club continues to taper down, and cash is sitting right where it needs to be, basically at that $8,000 level. And this is a little bit lower than where it was before just because I moved some money from my previous IRA into my Tastyworks IRA. So that looked like cash before because it was sitting on the sidelines. Now it's moved over into my trading accounts in my Tastyworks IRA. Otherwise, looking at the numbers here, overall up almost 3% on the month. You can see my cash was down quite a bit, but it's not really gone. It's just moved over into my trading accounts, which improved over 12%. Obviously, not all of that was market gains, but it's still good to see that going up pretty strongly. Real estate improving, stock market improving, and bonds down slightly. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of the S&P 500 and the future of oil in terms of OPEC and what they might decide going forward. Also, make sure you use any links in the description for any of the platforms you see in this video. They all are great platforms in my opinion, and you can get some free stuff if you use my link, and it really helps out the channel. Definitely comment down below what you think of any of my investments. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. And with that, let's get to today's jelly. Of course, it is 4th of July weekend, so that is awesome, and I love some good fireworks. And today's jelly is, of course, some of the best fireworks that have ever existed. So go ahead and watch just a couple of clips from this video. It is a very long video, so I will clip it down, and you can find the link to watch the full video in the description. So let's take a look at those.
The big one. There it is. Wow. Look at that. Unbelievable. Oh, yeah.
Our artwork doesn't last very long. And so a lot of that...
As you can tell, these fireworks are awesome. Definitely comment down below what you think of them. Make sure you like and subscribe before you go, and have a great day.